bug season. Who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just type in Grandeur Pet Solutions, and we are so happy that they're title sponsor for OutDrank The Coverage in 2023. Is your demanding work lifestyle in need of fire-resistant clothing that can keep up? Well, L4FR clothing should be your go-to for quality, affordability, safety, and style. L4FR was founded by a third-generation oil field worker who is also a veteran. Thus, this company has a deep appreciation for reliability and longevity, all while we provide first-rate customer service. Our durable apparel will serve you well for many years to come, whether you're working on a pipeline, a lineman climbing utility poles, or in any other environment requiring fire-resistant apparel. L4FR has you covered. Our apparel is tough enough to resist hazardous conditions while still providing high comfort and style. L4FR provides clothing options to ensure your safety and comfort, whether you're on the job or not. To view our complete inventory of flame-resistant garments, please visit our online store at l4frclothing.com or give us a call at 817-757-4935. Si habla español.
Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might start seeing some go back. It's Monday after, I guess, technically week 1 of the college football season. They do a weird thing where they call it 0 week, which, by the way, the high school used to do that here in Texas. But I think there was a pretty big game this past Saturday, intern Noe, and we're here to talk about it. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Oh, man, was like a perfect football weekend and just a sports weekend. If you're, fans like we are of the Cowboys, you're not really a Longhorn fan, but the Longhorns, my high school won. Your high school played. They did, buddy. They played. They gave it their best. But the Rangers are back on track. They're ready to roll to the World Series. It's a good weekend in Dallas. And more importantly, I woke up to 69 degrees.
Favorite number.
Yeah, my favorite number. Well, when I was 20, now I just go, man, that looks painful. Anyway, this is our inaugural. Well, not technically inaugural. We used to do a college show like 9 years ago, but this is technically our inaugural college show that we're actually putting up on the air. You, me, and intern Grant. That's what I'll start calling him. You, me, and Grant did one during our high school preview shows. We had technical issues, so we weren't able to really post that. What we're going to do each and every week here is kind of do what we do on the NFL show, just meander through the Big 12 and also just Texas college football in general. And then, of course, that'll probably bleed over into some major SEC stuff. Of course, next year it'll be an SEC show. But before we do all that, I ain't going to lie, it's like 10 in the morning here. I'm just drinking water. That's what I'm drinking. Intern Noe, how are you doing? And I know you're going to be hardcore and you're going to pull up some liquor right now, aren't you?
Well, the name of the show is OutDrank The Coverage. So in honor of that, I am drinking a little bit of Old Forester, 1970 Prohibition style. It's one of my favorite bourbons. It's just what you want in a bourbon. I wouldn't recommend this for you right now, but if I can finally get you to want to drink bourbon consistently, I'll get you this.
I can't remember what it's called, but one of the things that you left at the studio, the one that's 92 proof, Last night at kickoff of the Cowboy game, I had a little sniffer version of that, and it was like
Okay.
that 92 proof was perfect. It carried me the whole game. Just a couple sips.
Okay.
Barely finished it around the third quarter. Had a nice warm tumbly feeling. It was that good. It was that thing that you think about when you see on TV when the guy every night's cracking the scotch and rocks, and you're like, you're an alcoholic, dude. I don't care if you run a $500 million company, but no, it was really good. So maybe I am getting there. But your opinion, and of course we're going to talk Texas, Alabama. We'll talk that towards the back end of the show. But your opinion after basically 2 weeks of college football. What are your thoughts on where the Big 12 is? Because I think it's all over the map, not only figuratively, but literally with where everybody's playing in this. But you see the good of what Texas has done, and then you see the bad and K State, and then you see the bad of Houston, and even Oklahoma and TCU and all that. So, what are your thoughts so far?
I couldn't agree with you more, man. I mean, even the 2-0 teams like BYU, they don't look that impressive.
Yeah.
Cincinnati had a pretty close win against Pittsburgh this
That's
weekend.
what I always call a professional win. Pittsburgh is a good D1 college team. They're not great. They're not what they were a couple of years ago with Kenny. I can't throw it in the NFL Pickett. I told you about him. Well, they looked terrible yesterday. We'll talk about that on the NFL show. I was big on that. I never understood the love for him in the NFL. But anyway, in college he was great. But I just felt that that's one of those wins that a D1 school like Cincinnati, who I feel is now at the level where 9 wins is their floor or should be their floor every year. I felt that was a really good win.
It was. And, there's a team that finally learned how to win a few years ago, and now they're in a position where they're going to get that Big 12 recruiting base, and they're going to get even better. The competition is going to get better, but yeah, I agree with you. They're a team that can probably get 9 wins every year. Just it's such a good program. I'm trying to think of anybody else in this conference.
Well, I want
The
to bring up
Kansas Jayhawks, huh?
Kansas is good. Again, Kansas, another one. That's a game 3 years ago they don't win.
Yeah.
That's a game that even maybe 2 years ago they don't win. For them, it's going to be, can they stay healthy? Because that's where they kind of derailed last year, because they were low key last year, maybe going to play for the Big 12 until the quarterback got hurt and they got decimated on the offensive line. But Jalen Daniels, 277 yards, a couple touchdowns, threw an interception. That's fine. You had Daniel Heshaw Jr., him and Devin Neal, and that's where Kansas right now, they combine for 218 yards. You and I have talked about this with Texas. You don't build a college team with your first 22. That's all great. But when you start winning, you've got to have your first 44. You've got to have a pure, true 2 deep that, yeah, you're going to lose something when your starter comes out, but you're not going to lose so much that it completely derails your game.
Which is what happened to Kansas last year. I think they started
Exactly.
5-0. Daniels got hurt. They lost 5 in a row. He came back. He still wasn't really that healthy.
Yeah. At least, but they still bounced back at the end though and won 3 or 4.
Correct. Yeah. Kansas State looks good. Ho-hum win. Will Howard had a pretty good game against Troy. They won 42-13. He had 250 yards passing, 33 rushing, 5 combined TDs.
Yep.
It was against an easier comp. It was against Troy. So
they did what they should do.
They did what they should do. I would say I'm not as impressed with Oklahoma.
No, that was a 14-11 game. Now, SMU is not SMU of old, folks. SMU is, again, they are a consistently 6 to 7 win team that's trying to kind of bump 2 more levels and become that 8 and 9 win team. But OU just, I don't know. You knew the issues, and then last week that they beat a terrible Arkansas State team. They scored 70, and that number kind of always gets you in, oh my God, 70. No matter even if it's a bad team, 70 might mean that offense is better and all, and it's not. Now, one thing though is you can tell that that's a Brent Venables defense. That Oklahoma defense, that's the one thing that's going to keep them in games. They might end up looking more like K-State of last year than what we think of Oklahoma over the last 20 years.
Hey, well, I mean, honestly, their defense hasn't been that good in a while, even
exactly
in the Riley years with Caleb Williams and all them and Spencer Rattler. It hasn't been good in a while, but yeah, this could be a return to the old guard where they were winning with defense. They could keep consistently win like this every week, and then I'll change my opinion. But as of right now, I know SMU is going to the ACC next year, so they're not a bad program
Oh
now.
no, they're not a bad program.
So I still was expecting a little bit more out of Oklahoma and another year of Venables. Let me look at this. Oh, I guess I want to skip to Texas Tech.
Okay, yeah, well, they went from looking crappy last week, losing to Wyoming after being up, and then Wyoming comes back. Wyoming gets the 2-point conversion. I know they lost this week, but man, that was a really good game against Oregon.
Yeah, I mean they Oregon got up on them, and then Texas Tech came back. Then it was kind of back and forth in the fourth quarter. Texas Tech was driving for a game-winning field goal, and then it was a pick six at the end with about 35 seconds left. So
Yeah.
I think Tyler Shook had a pretty good game. It was kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Well, this was his knock. This was the thing about him is he can do some of the great things. He can do some of the Johnny Manziel moves and scramble out. He ran. He had 100 yards. The problem is that he also tends to fumble and he makes bad reads at the worst time. And that was a bad read. That was not a good read at all. I finally got to see the last of it. I get to see the play when it happened. But I saw the highlights this morning, and that was a bad throw. You don't make that throw in high school.
Their 23-game winning streak in home openers ends, and they're 0-2 for the first time since 1990. I think Joey McGuire will ride the ship, and I think they'll be fine. I think they play Tarleton State next weekend, so that should get them back on the winning track.
Yeah, I want to bring in a non-Big 12 team that's going to be a Big 12 team next year. And I think you probably know where I'm going because they are, if it wasn't for them, Texas, Alabama was the big point of the week. But right now, the Colorado is stealing the show when it comes to college football. First off, I'm going to say I'm absolutely there for it. I know Colorado beat Texas in the 2001 Big 12 championship game, and I was there. But I loved the old late Joe McCartney Buffalo Bills with Darian Hagan at quarterback, Eric the Enemy Bieniemy at wide running back, running the option that they did. So I'm for Colorado being good again. To me, college football is better when Colorado is in the mix. People say that they won't come to the game. They will as long as they're winning. That's every school. In saying all that, I'm going to say this again, and it unfortunately because of where things are in the world today. It takes everything you got. Oh, I'm sorry. I was about to do an 80s sitcom song right there. But it feels like if you make any kind of comment, it gets politicized. But I do want to remind everybody they beat TCU, who is way down, and they beat Nebraska, who is not even close to being up. I feel like some people are jumping on this Colorado or this Colorado bandwagon because they know it won't last, and they want to make it heavy and make it burn when it crashes. Great start. But people are talking about Colorado in the playoffs and all that. I think we need to really tap the brakes on that.
I really think so. In TCU, if I have to, be the guy that says something bad about Colorado, I will say they couldn't run the ball. They had no defense.
Mm-hmm.
Against Nebraska was, trash talking a little bit. Colorado felt a little disrespected.
Colorado won. Yes, that's an old Big 8 rivalry, man.
Yeah,
that is for all the talk about Oklahoma and Nebraska, Colorado, especially in that 88 through 94 era when Colorado was really, really good. That was some great battles. So it was good to see that part back.
I started watching in 93 and 94, and that was like Cordell Stewart, Charles Johnson.
Yes.
May he rest in peace. Those are some really good Colorado teams.
I forgot about that. Damn.
It was more recently. Yeah, I think he was only 50 years old.
Yeah.
I remember either Hail Mary against Michigan. Remember that one? Yeah, that's when I was like, "Oh, Cordell Stewart." I was like,
iconic play of college football, I think.
Yeah,
but
I was gonna say that was one of my favorite uniform games too.
Oh yeah,
contrast, especially if Colorado was at home, they wear their darker colors, and Nebraska or the white and red. It was this nice contrast, and it was always a cloudy game, like the overcast.
Because it was Thanksgiving weekend. It was them and it was Colorado and Nebraska in the early game, and then Texas and A&M in the 2:00 game. That's how it used to be for me during the Thanksgiving weekends. But I think Colorado's going to be good this year. But I think we are going to have that. USC and things like that. Now maybe they can get into another shootout with USC because USC's defense ain't going to be that much great. But I just feel like some people are riding the train because they know it's going to fail, and then they want to be able to jump off immediately and start pointing fingers, and that's just shitty. It's just shitty. Why can't we just enjoy a an iconic person in Deion Sanders, who, if you'd have told me in 1995 he would eventually be a D1 coach at Colorado, I would be like, yeah, that's not going to happen, because we had perceptions of him, and then you start to peel back the layers of what he was as a person and how he coaches, or how he was he was a guy that was into the technique. It wasn't just about his athleticism. Then he did the high school stuff, and some of that wasn't great. And when he was trying to run a school up here in Dallas, and I just would have never believed he'd be a head football coach at Colorado, but he's doing it. It's fun. Why can't it just be that? Why does everything have to be a referendum on our life right now in our society and what Deion Sanders represents? He's just a coach. He's a loud, brash coach. And to be fair, I'm about to inject politicism into it, even though I just said it would. If he was a white coach doing everything he's doing, nobody would say shit about it. It would be cool. It'd be fun. Oh, he's young and hip. But I do think there's some social connotations too because of who it is.
Yeah, probably for some people.
And he represents something. Let's be honest. He represents something for a lot of the older NFL fan. He's that line in the sand, him, and then the 90s Cowboys were that line in the sand for them when football changed. It got louder, it got brasher, it got cocky, all that kind of stuff. All the things that we grew up on and was fun and we love it. I listen to people now talk about high schoolers. Man, they talk so much trash, but there's never any fighting. Yeah, because it's a joke. They're in on it. Everybody's having fun with it on the field. We used to bark at Longview. Yeah, it was serious because they're our rival, but a lot of it was also like let's see who can make the other team laugh. Let's say crap, that kind of stuff. You've been there. And so I think Sanders, I think there's a lot of the boomer age. They're just pissed that Sanders is in a authoritative position because they think of him still as throwing water on what's his name after Tim McCarver after the World Series game and things like that.
Hey, let's look at Colorado's schedule and try to predict their record for the.
Okay, let me pull it up.
All right, I have it pulled up now.
Go ahead and start.
Their next game, I think they're going to get College Game Day to show up. It's going to be a home game against Colorado State. I think that's
so. Do you, man? You could make the case that the next 3 games could be a Colorado game day. You've got Colorado State, their rival. Mm-hmm. They're on the road against Oregon, and then they're at home against USC.
Big, Colorado State's a rivalry game, but the next 2 are big, especially for title implications.
Colorado State's going to be a good one because this is one of those. Not that Colorado State's good, and I think Colorado will win by 4 touchdowns, probably name their score. But this is one of those where you're getting the rival who, it's weird to be a rival and a trap game at the same time. But you're the rival, but who's more rivalistic right now, Colorado or Colorado State? And then Colorado's got Oregon and USC to worry about in back-to-back weeks. I think Colorado will name their score in that one, though, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I feel so too. What do you think about going to Oregon? Because I wasn't really impressed with how they played against. I mean, there was Gutty, Bo Nix, had another good performance, but I wasn't really impressed with their game against Texas Tech. Texas Tech was kind of desperate though, so they had that crushing loss against Wyoming the week prior. So I could see them trying to play a little bit tougher, play a little harder, little trick plays here and there to mess up Oregon.
I think Oregon again until Colorado's defense does it against a good offense.
Yeah,
every game is in play. Every game. And even Nebraska, I know Nebraska only scored 14 points, but Nebraska, whose offense was anemic against Minnesota, did some good things in this game. Sims had a terrible interception, which is kind of what snapped their chances. But, I mean, honestly, Caleb Williams. Now, the great thing is I think Colorado will be able to score with them, but Caleb Williams and USC might drop 60 points on Colorado. It legitimately could be a 60-55 type of game, easily.
Yeah, and I think I kind of worry about Colorado as far as trying to close out games.
Yes.
Through 2 games in the Sanders administration, they haven't been able to really run the ball, and their defense, like you were saying, hasn't been looking that great. So That's two facets of your football program that are lacking. But it's 2 games. We don't really know what this Colorado team is made of.
No. Just and like I said, just sit back and enjoy the ride for now. The offense does look like it's going to be exciting all year. Speaking of, we don't know what's going on. How much money have the big money donors of A&M started to raise to pay off Jimbo Fisher to get him out of there? Because that, as bad as last year was, this game against Miami might be the low point for A&M. They lose 48-33. Their defense looks absolutely terrible as Tyler Van Dyke goes for 374 yards and 5 touchdowns. And they probably left 21 points on the field. I went back and watched that game this morning when I woke up.
Yeah.
And I mean, A&M looked, we joke aside, I'm wearing a Longhorn hat. I'm a Longhorn fan, but I have covered high school football in Texas long enough to know, I know a lot of the kids on the roster. I don't root against A&M unless they're playing Texas. I genuinely wanted them to have success when they were in the SEC. But I don't know, man. This might be the low point for the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M.
Well, the thing I was noticing in this Miami Texas A&M game was the fact that anytime A&M had a response, Miami would immediately respond back.
And that's credit to the Canes right there, because that's what good teams do. And I'm not saying they're a good team, but you're right. But we have to give some of that credit to Miami for being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Cristobal is kind of building a pretty good program there. Again, this has happened before with the old Georgia coach, Mark Richt, I think.
Yeah.
When he was there, I think the first or second year, they had this fast start. They got to number 2 in the country, and they kind of tailed off, and they didn't get anywhere near there ever since. So I'll hold my reservation about Miami till year end. It could have just been that A&M played a really good team that's just not ranked right now, but we won't know until the end of the year. I will say, though, the offense is looking pretty good under Bobby Petrino. So that's I guess.
It did, but I mean, so, they jump up. Texas A&M jumps up and they get a touchdown and a field goal, and they're up 10-0. And then Miami gets a touchdown after a really good drive, and then A&M gets a touchdown. They're up 17-7, and that right there is where a good team starts to shut the door. And they went 3 and out, and gave up back-to-back touchdowns.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was saying that goes along the point that anytime A&M had anything good going for them, Miami would respond.
Yeah, but what I'm also saying is I think the offense the numbers might be a little skewed, because it was 41-24, I think, or 26, and then Texas A&M got a couple drives where they were able to get some empty yards. They didn't run the ball well. They only ran for 97 yards. But you and I talk about this all the time with Cowboys, because they can have games like last night, which stat-wise didn't come out, but we've seen like Indianapolis last year, where the game just completely gets out of hand and the offense puffs off their stats and it looks better than it really did. I think A&M at times look good, but Connor Wakeman's still throwing too many interceptions. You're having him throw 53 times I say this, you threw for 53 times and you only got 336 yards. That's very old school Texas Tech, that's what you're trying to do. That's fine if you're just trying to do a little fun. But to me, it felt like they're struggling to take the top off the offense.
Well, if he's a good enough coach, Jimbo Fisher will have them rebound for the rest of the season. But if last season was any indication, this could be the start of something much more serious.
They've got L.A. Monroe this week. They've got Auburn. Now, the great thing is they've got Auburn. Auburn's in a rebuild. They can win that. Arkansas is, Arkansas is solid, but Arkansas ain't too much different to where A&M is, as far as you just never know what you're going to get. And then they get A&M. They get Alabama October 7th, and we'll go ahead and cruise into that, and we'll finish the show with talking Alabama, because Texas goes in, beats Alabama 34-24. Quinn Ewers 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, wasn't sacked, which was the biggest thing. You look at that game, man, and I know the Tide had 10 penalties and they had a couple interceptions, but man, there was nothing fluky about what Texas did to Alabama. And I think that speaks more of Texas than Alabama. I don't think Alabama's that far off from being Alabama. There was a couple drives, like when it looked like in that third quarter when Texas might pull away, that you saw Bama and you saw what Jalen Milroy and that offense can do. But man, Texas, that front line for Texas offensively, but more importantly, defensively. At times, that defensive line was living in the backfield. I think legitimately, I know I'm a Texas fan, blah, blah, blah. I think legitimately that is the best win since like 09's. I know you beat Georgia, but that's a bowl game. I'm one of those that I do truly believe in hey, I didn't want to be in this bowl game, so we're not going to try as hard.
It's a Sugar Bowl too. It's a high-paying bowl game.
Yeah, but the players at the time don't care. Now they will because they might get some money out of it. But now, oh, dude, that right there.
What?
I just solved your players not playing in bowl games. Bowl player, you get it's like the Pro Bowl. Yeah. You get 10,000 if you lose. You get 15,000 if you win. Something like that. That would keep players in.
That would.
But anyway, and I get Texas beat Oklahoma a couple times in that stretch, but that's a rivalry game. That's going to happen. This was the most impressive win I've seen in Texas since 09. Legitimately.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's kind of a continuation of what happened last season where Texas was up, was it 14-0 or 10-0 on Alabama?
It was 13-0.
13-0, and then Ewers got hurt, knocked out of the game, and it was kind of just an ugly game until Alabama finally woke up in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's almost exactly the same game, except Ewers didn't get hurt. He played the full game. Hey, kudos to Texas. I mean, this is a big statement win for Sarkisian. He's kind of had like a 500 record his first 2 years at UT. Is kind of I'm not saying a make or break year, but
I think it was. I think
yeah, I mean, in my opinion, yes, but I wasn't sure what general opinion was.
Oh no, Texas, you're at a point at Texas's program is you basically get 3 years, fair or not. You get 3 years, and you either have to be specifically straight pointing up like they are now, or at least you see everything coming together, and maybe you have injuries or something. Now, great win, but Texas has to show this week against Wyoming that Quinn Ewers can get up for the bad games as much, because Quinn Ewers is kind of showing that's why he's a big-time quarterback. That's great. But we need you to play well in the Wyoming games, in the Texas Tech on the road game where you're up 10 points with 5 minutes left, and I'm there in the 200-degree heat thinking we have a win and they lose.
Is he still rocking the mullet?
No, he shaved his head. Like, he looks completely different. Yeah, he legit, I'll give him credit. He took all that to heart. He said, yeah, I know the mullet doesn't matter, but perception, I need to show that I'm a leader. I thought the run game was okay, but I don't think Sark is one of those that really, like, if you have a 1,500-yard back, that's great, but if you don't, that's fine. I go back to the defense though. Yeah, they gave up a couple big plays, but again, that's going to happen. You're going to give up big plays to Alabama offense. In today's football, with how you spread the field out, and everybody's a one-on-one matchup 90% of the time, you're going to lose a battle once every 20 plays. And that's literally what happened. Texas controlled, and Bama hit a couple big plays in that third, fourth, and it made it a game. But like we were talking about, like with Miami, man, Texas responded every time. And then that's when they started running the ball pretty solid too. That was impressive in that fourth quarter. Yeah. It's the old, you drive for show, you putt for dough. Running in the first quarter is great. It's running in the fourth quarter when you have a 7-point lead and you don't need to necessarily score. You need to burn 4 minutes off the clock. And they were able to do that with a mixture of runs and short passes.
Yeah, most of their rush, I mean, they ran for 105 yards, but most of it was in the fourth quarter, just trying to pull the game away. And hey, Alabama they're filled with 5-star and 4-star recruits.
Oh yeah. So, everybody's trying to act like they're buried. I still think they run the table to Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Alabama is just fine. This is not a knock on Alabama. This is more of UT kind of has it figured out now. And
we think.
Huh?
We think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, we'll see how the rest of the season goes. Looking at their schedule, I don't see them really struggling in the rest of the way. They play Wyoming. Baylor hasn't been looking good. Kansas at home is definitely winnable. Red River game against Oklahoma. I have no idea how good that Oklahoma defense is, but we'll find out more in this shootout. At Houston, it could be a trap game. Houston's actually not bad.
Yeah, they got beat by Rice.
Back in the day, BYU was a trap game.
I still don't trust that game.
Kansas State will be a very tough game, but it'll be in Austin. That's a one big plus.
Well, and that's the one thing about this schedule this year. If Texas, I'm not saying if Texas doesn't do it this year, they'll never do it, but all the big games are at home. Outside of the Oklahoma, but that's a game you're used to playing on the road. You've got BYU at home, you've got Kansas State at home, you've got Texas Tech at home. Iowa State and TCU. I know TCU's been tough to play for Texas the last few years, but that's because of the teams, not because, oh my God, TCU's tough to play in.
Yeah.
So this schedule.
We'll see how TCU plays the rest of the season. They might. I mean, Chandler Morris is a really good quarterback. They might only have one loss going into that game, and it'll be November. It might be a make or break if they're going to beat TCU. I know Iowa State's always a trap game in Ames, Iowa. I still think Texas can win that game, and to close out the season, depending on how Texas Tech fares, that could be just another cakewalk.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm not worried about anything. It's Texas and that consistency that I got used to between 98 and 2010 is not there anymore.
Yeah,
but I'm not. I think TCU has multiple losses. I still stand by my point that TCU is going to be a 7-win team at best this year. Chandler Morris is an okay quarterback. He's a solid quarterback. He's a quarterback that can have days like he did against Nicholls State, and he'll look good at times against Colorado, but he also will tend to make some really bad mistakes at times. And that defense is still terrible. I know Texas couldn't score. That Texas was in a weird part when they played TCU last year. But people need to remember TCU's defense wasn't spectacularly good last year. They just had an offense that could protect them. And so they would jump out 14-0. And so you'd look at the score and you go, oh, okay, 42-28. That's good. And but if you looked at the actual game, their defense was giving up yards, but the offense was protecting them. They don't have an offense to protect them now. And I think that's going to catch up to them. And they've got, I just can't remember where it was. They've got, let me check it out. I think they've got K-State. They've got K-State. Right, so they play Texas right before Thanksgiving. They've got Texas Tech on the road, K-State on the road, and BYU at home. I would be shocked if Texas Tech wins 2 of those, and they could very well lose all 3. I wasn't big on TCU going into the season. They're not a program that they have to rebuild, which is fine. They can't just lose 9 starters to the NFL like Alabama and just roll back in with 17 more 5-stars. They're still trying to get to that level. So I think there's a lot of growing pains for them. All right, let's look at this week's set of games. Nothing really big. TCU at Houston, speaking of, that's kind of and it's different because the first 2 teams in the Big 12 that went, are they doing the championship this year?
I believe they will be the top 2 teams.
All right, so you can lose a game, and you could probably lose 2 games and still be in it. But this is with two teams that are teetering, especially Houston. We didn't even really talk about it. Houston everybody was making fun of Texas last week struggling against Rice. Rice is a better football team than people realize. Christian McCaffrey's brother is on that team, and he is an absolute stud. And everybody was like, oh, wow, they only beat Rice 37-10. But you saw what Rice could do this week as they jump out 28-0 on Houston. Give Houston credit. They get back into the game. But Rice wins in overtime. You got to think Dana Holmgren's job's on the line. They basically fired Colt McCoy, who was winning 8 and 9 games a year. They did the old Frank Solich at Nebraska. You're not winning enough. We feel like we could win better. And they bring in Dana Holmgren. Huh? Or not Colt McCoy, Major Applewhite. Sorry.
Major, yeah. Okay.
White quarterback from Texas. That's all. We all look alike, Noe. That's what you always tell me. But they fire him, and he was winning 8-9 games, recruiting well. Yeah. They bring in Dana Holmgren, and he's only went backwards. And he has went backwards spectacularly. Like a couple years ago when they were ranked, and everybody was thinking they could make a playoff run, and then they start the season like 1-2 and got just embarrassing losses.
Houston, they've had a run of recent years. They got some recruits like Ed Oliver years ago, so they can get talent there. And if a high profile coach like Daniel Holgerstrom is not doing it, then you got to get somebody else. This is a team that can compete, and they're going to be in a much more high profile conference, aka it's going to be attractive to recruiters. I'm not sure what the Big 12 is going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years, but as of right now, Big 12 is a major big deal.
Oh, I think it stays for now in the Power Five just because of the names of the teams and the amount of teams. I've told you my thing many times now. Eventually, what is the SEC now and what is the Big Ten now will split off from everybody and basically just form their own like it'll look like the NFL. It'll be like the College Football League, and then everybody else will be doing whatever they decide to do in a Division One. But until that happens, yeah, the Big 12 is. I mean, Houston legitimately, if they can figure it out, has a way to a playoff path. Not to this year. I'm talking about like as a team each year.
Yeah, for sure.
Not this year. But I don't think it's going to be with Dana Holmgren because you don't fire a guy who's winning 8 and 9 games only to get a guy who can't even do that. And that goes to show you whether it's high school, whether it's pro, whether it's college, you don't always necessarily improve if you think you've reached like you have a glass ceiling, like you're only winning 9 games, or like Dallas, you're only making the divisional playoffs. You're not guaranteed to break through just by making a change. You still got to make the correct change, and they didn't. I do think TCU wins this game. I think it's going to be one of those old school. It's kind of like the Big 12's kind of swung back into where there's going to be a lot of 45 to 42 type games this year.
Tell me about the other big games this weekend. I mean, there's not really too much for week 3 of college football, but
well, you got Spencer Rattler at Georgia. That's always interesting. He's good enough to
good enough, yeah.
UNC though really dominated them in that first game. I was a little surprised by that.
And then UNC barely won this week.
Yeah, UNC who it was somebody's like
Wagner
or somebody. I can't remember, but you got Colorado State at Colorado.
Well, Appalachian State. Appalachian State's a really good team.
Oh, is that who? Yeah. That's. I mean, it's not okay, but yeah, they've always been a good D2 team. I think they're D1 now, but they've always been a tough out. We all know about the Michigan, Washington at Michigan State. Boy, Michigan State. Huh?
Yeah. No, you're going into what I was going to want to talk about.
I legitimately feel sorry for Michigan State fans. It feels like after the dropped punt block touchdown win over Michigan, ever since that moment, everything's went downhill for them. You think you finally got that worker man coach, the everyday coach, and then all that's happened with him. In saying that, man, the week after, that can rally people. Where that starts to affect the team is 3 or 4 weeks later where it starts to wear them down. But the very week after, usually when shit like this happens, you usually see a team respond. It's at Michigan State. I think it's at night. I still don't trust a Washington at number 8 necessarily. I think Washington wins, but don't be surprised if this is a 21-19 type game or Washington has to kick a field goal late or something.
I mean, Washington has a couple of Heisman Trophy candidates on their offense. Their quarterback Penix Jr. is really, really good. I mean, they have just their receiver. I can't remember his name. It's Udo's. Anyway, he was a preseason All-American. I'll look him up real quick. I know I had like a brain freeze right there. But yeah, no, he's a Blitnikoff front runner right now.
Oh no, Washington's loaded. But again, it's the same thing. I go back with like a Texas team. They're a team over the last 10 years. It feels like there's been multiple years where in September they're 8th, 9th, 11th, and then by November they've got 3 losses, 2 of them to average teams. They've got to prove it to me, and I don't even know if they beat Michigan State if that proves it to me. Even if they, if they demolish them, it's expected. If they don't demolish them, well, then you're allowing a team with no head coach to stay in the game.
Yeah. And Mark D'Antonio, their former head coach, is going to be an associate head coach or assistant head coach for the rest of the season.
They're clarifying it that he's a consultant. I don't know if that. Now, my question is, do they go back to that? Well, let's look. I know again, Big 12, but screw y'all. It's Noe and I. We love to talk all football.
Oh, and the Washington receiver is Rome Udonzi.
Okay. Do you see Michigan?
Udonzi, sorry, I'm gonna mess up that last name.
Do you see Michigan State maybe going back to D'Antoni after this year?
I mean, they have a longtime assistant right now being their interim coach. I could see him just being the coach for the season, but D'Antonio is basically coaching him, helping him out a lot, almost kind of running the team, but not really having the title. I just don't
Yeah,
see.
I think I think it's more of, at least on paper,
Yeah,
I think it's more of he's gonna just kind of help him, like with, hey, you need to remember now, down and distance. Go ahead and start setting up your next down and distance. It's 2nd and 8. Prepare for 3rd and 8, or second. And, that's what I think. It's more of that.
yeah.
I can't remember what happened with him at Michigan State.
He just retired. I mean, they were kind of falling off a
Oh,
little
he's
bit.
67. Yeah, I don't know if they'll go back to it. Well, I mean, you look at Mac Brown.
Yeah, I mean, what he's doing in North Carolina is amazing.
Yeah, they did. I'm sorry, they did officially name him as associate head coach. So that, I think that makes credence that he might end up, if he's. I think you basically get him to see how he feels after doing it again. Like, hey, you want to run this a couple more years, set something up, or are you too tired? So I think this is a good thing for them, because as far as good as you can be with everything that's happened. But man, that program's got to figure out some things. I know, all jokes aside, you had the Michigan State gymnast doctor and all that. I mean, they just got out of like a $1 billion lawsuit after all that Mark Nasir, about the.
Yeah.
They just got out of all that, and now this happens, and this is so egregious. I mean, like, we're not going to get into it. Just go look. But I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you this: if you had said name 1 head coach, name 3 head coaches that will never have this happen to, he would have been one of them. I thought he was like, I thought Michigan State hit the home run by luck when he fell into their lap.
And it has nothing to do with just him, in my opinion. It has to do with, Michigan State has already had harassment issues in this program for years. You would think the last thing they would do is have a coach commit another harassment against someone that is a advocate against harassment.
Because she was brutally assaulted. And I mean, just anyway, that's how we're going to close up our first OutDrank the Coverage. Noe's smiling about rape. That's what he always does here. That's going to do
make that
it.
a thumbnail.
I think you two would be like, guys, we need to talk to y'all.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do each and every week. We're just going to kind of break down. We'll start in the Big 12 and we'll start with Texas, but like we did today, we'll weave our way through, because I don't think anybody wants to hear about. Well, I will say this: great game by UTSA. They beat Texas State. Now, I don't know if everybody knows the story about that, but Jeff Traylor, the head coach at UTSA, was the high school head coach of Texas State, G.J. Kinney. So that's a cool story. He was on Jeff's staff for a couple years. GJ was an Philadelphia Eagle forever. He was kind of bounced back and forth on the practice squad. But that was a good game for UTSA and a good game for Texas Tech. I know they lost after they beat Baylor, but UTSA is a really good program. And so that was a really good game. But that's going to do it. Until next time, he's intern Noe. I'm Terry Bennett, and this has been OutDrank the Coverage, the college edition.
Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might start seeing some go back.